Welcome back. My name is Carol McKibben. I'm your host for YourTown. And our focus today is Salinas, as it will be every single time. My guests are Megan Hunter, the Director of Community Development for Salinas, Cary and Siegfried, the Director of Libraries and Community Services in Salinas, and Kirstan Lundquist, the Recreation and Community Services Superintendent. And we're talking about the power in Salinas because we are not elected officials, none of us, but you are responsible for implementing the policies that elected officials go on television to discuss as solutions to everything, right? So we're talking about the small things that you've done and the big things. And one of the things that's big that we're all really focused on is reversing the unintended negative consequences of zoning policies and housing policies that were put in place by the federal government, state and local governments in the early part of the century. That, zoning is a good thing, but it segregated people in not so great ways and led to a situation in Salinas where housing has become a huge problem. Not just affordable housing, but livable housing, housing that isn't dangerous. Mm-hmm. So I understand, Megan, you would like to speak to that to some extent.
Yeah, I was going to say we're definitely have a housing crisis in Salinas as we do in Monterey County.
And in the entire state of California, yeah. But never mind that.
But I think what people don't realize is that Salinas is one of the, I think it's the third or fourth most unaffordable location in the nation, because not only do we have expensive housing stock, but we have really low wage. We have a lot of farm workers who have very low wages. And so what we see in Salinas, the consequence of that is severe overcrowding. I also am in charge of code enforcement, and it's really sad when we go to places and we find people living in garages with no sanitation, living in tool sheds, people who are packed in, 20 in a house with stacked beds. So one of the things that our department is really focused on is how to address this housing crisis. How do we get more affordable housing? But we generally need more housing, period. I mean, a lot of people, middle-class people, are being squeezed out and can't afford it. So we're looking at various different things to address this crisis. One of the things that's kind of exciting is we're working on a regional farm worker housing study, because that really
that's great.
Is impacting the East LSL, but also other parts of Salinas, is how to house folks. Because it's hard to house them in areas without sanitation or other places. So,
right.
So we're working on that, and we're, again, looking at creative ways that we can build more affordable housing, and so that we can address the overcrowding that exists in the LSL, figuring out how we can put people in safe, clean, sanitary housing. So.
Well, it helps to connect to academics, because they study all the cities, right? So we connected, you and I, with Stanford students who came in to try to help with this issue. And one of the things that they did, besides discover some new possibilities for grants, was to note that the public housing in Salinas is not so bad. It's not in terrible shape. It's the non-public housing projects that are the problem.
Right.
So that's what when you talk about affordable housing and new housing, that's what you're looking at. It's not a matter of tearing down public housing projects.
No.
Salinas doesn't have that. What they have are houses that were put up helter-skelter in the aftermath of the Dust Bowl migration that were never fixed properly.
Right.
Even with the annexation in the 60s, not fixed. So that's the issue that you're addressing today, that you are dealing with today.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's a two-pronged thing. The rehabilitation of the housing that exists. How do we rehab it?
Without tearing it down.
Right. The students are doing did really great work in helping us form the basis of doing a housing conditions inventory, which will help us really drill down on those housing units that we have to fix. But the other thing that's kind of exciting is we have an accessory dwelling unit, a new ordinance that would allow for the legal conversion of garages to safe, habitable housing without having the zoning regulations that prohibit it. And we know in the LSL, there's a lot of people that are living in the garages that aren't safe. And if we can start working through grants and also through this zoning relief to start developing those units, we'll have much better, safer housing for families.
Which is also a more humane way of approaching the problem than just tearing it down and building apartment buildings. And it's a good example of why top-down solutions often don't work very well. Because that was the solution in the 70s, tear it down and build a building. And but the people in the community were horrified, and they lost a lot in that, and it's notorious now as a policy that doesn't work that you're obviously trying to correct.
And also the culture, we have to think that we have multi-generations living under these roofs, and if we can create some privacy, so you could have, you know, parents and children and grandchildren living together, and it's an economic way that they can actually afford to buy a house. You know, this is a win-win solution for those families that are struggling.
It's great, and it's polar opposite of the way we handled things in the early part of the century, which was to say, no, multiple families cannot live together. And that just kind of doesn't work. Well, Cary Ann and I are working together on a history project this is the history project that also gives pride of place to people by listening. And we're doing an event April 30th, the launch of the project. We're talking about beyond literacy, that everybody knows their own history and everyone should contribute to their history. So we're working together on this new narrative of Salinas. But you're also doing a lot of programs on local history, local events. Founders Day is coming up. Can you talk a little bit about those community initiatives, or what else your department is doing towards promoting more positive views of the city and as an endpoint?
Sure. I think in a lot of cases, libraries are or public libraries or academic libraries, any kind, are kind of traditionally the holder of public, a city's history. And I think that's really important. And I think the Salinas Public Library isn't an exception to that, but I think we haven't always done such a great job of being able to connect the people with the history. And so I think that's why your project does such a great job of letting people be part of telling the story of Salinas. And it's really kind of inspired us in a lot of ways to be able to look at our local history archives and what we've collected and try to get it out there and available for people. The Salinas Public Library did a number of years ago put together a project of oral histories, and so we've got a lot of those oral histories online, just people being able to tell their story. And so we're working on our webpage presence to really be able to create a place for people to go and hear those histories and maybe think about creating their own histories as well, but just as a way for people to see their place in the community.
And that's the context part. And again, as with Megan, we're linking it to the university. So let's see what the university can do to help with that, to put those stories in context, evaluate them, critically analyze them, and look at Salinas in regional context, in the context of urban history in the United States. It has a role to play. It's important. And we need to figure out how and why and allow people to contribute to that. So the library is an enormous resource and centerpiece for gathering stories that everyday people have about their lives and experiences, and we'll work together on the project to make that something that everyone can share beyond the city itself. So moving beyond just a local history and into an evaluation of Salinas's history in the context of urban California and urban United States. So we know that places like the Alisal are not unique to Salinas, that this is something that every community has to deal with nowadays. Do you have some ideas, Kirstan, or some new ways of understanding how all of this fits into your work with residents of Salinas in moving the community forward?
I think it's all about relationship building, right? And so really being there to listen, really being there to react and help empower the community. We do a lot of work with neighborhood groups because really it's the neighborhoods know how to solve their own problems. You know, we've talked about that earlier. It doesn't need to be that top-down approach. We just need to empower our residents to give them resources and point them in the right direction, and then support them as they
and that's
work
where
to
the
make
top-down
changes.
helps. That's where it helps. I mean, you need it from all sides.
Yeah, and they need to understand how city government does work, and the process to work within the city to kind of make those changes. And so I think that's where a recreation department in partnership with our community safety department as well has been doing leadership academies that kind of help build that capacity out in the neighborhoods for people to solve their own problems and instead of looking to someone else to solve them.
So all of this is about community empowerment, and that's what the focus is. We also need nonprofits to come in and provide some organizational help, and you do draw on consultants for support because neighborhoods may know what the problems are. They may not know what solutions have been tried in Flint, Michigan, for example, and failed or succeeded that can be built on. So in that way, everybody can work together without anyone sort of taking charge. And so it sounds like when you are faced with this enormous task of making the city a better place to live, which everyone wants, but everyone also wants the magic wand. And the suggestion that perhaps the federal government or the local government can wave that wand is what we're kind of coming to nonsense. That it has to be a concerted effort. We have to listen to one another, and we have to think of creative ways to bring the community in and help them. So they may know what their problems are, but there are lots of possible solutions to those problems. Which one feels good? Which one is right? So we've identified affordable housing, education and literacy, safe spaces to play, to connect with one another. There is a perceived problem of homelessness in Salinas. I'm not so sure that it's as terrible as it's been suggested. But even to that end, you know, listening to those that are most directly affected and then using good governance and good policy to help make change, but include the people who are feeling the pain to be part of the change. It sounds like the right thing. So are there any last thoughts before we leave for the day?
Well, I was just going to say, I think it's really important to focus on empowerment because I often think that people underestimate residents, and I've seen, you know, both here and other places I've worked, residents do tremendous work. And sometimes I don't think we always celebrate how people are solving community and neighborhood problems every day. So I think it's our
in small ways.
And I think it's our jobs to, as Kirstan said, to to be there as a resource and to try to aid in that because we're limited. Government is limited. We're limited in our capacity. But if we can build, this whole movement across Salinas, we can really accomplish quite a lot.
And what you're also saying is that you're bringing people together. So that neighborhood is doing something that is solving the garage problem, and the people across town may not know about it.
Right.
So what you're also saying is that you're offering people who live in Salinas opportunities to cross barriers.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that is empowerment.
Yeah, absolutely.
Last thoughts, Cary Ann.
Well, I think kind of on the opposite spectrum too. I've been in Salinas for a little over a year now, and so one of the I think
feels like
that
forever.
yeah, you know, one of the stereotypes I think of government workers is sometimes that we're bureaucrats and we're trying to follow rules and policies just kind of blindly. And one of the things I've really observed since I've been here in Salinas is people in our departments care about the community that they're serving, because in many respects they're part of the community that they're serving. So there really is an intense love for Salinas and the want to do better things. So I think that's one of the great things about working for the city of Salinas right now, is there is this real attachment to the community, and we really want better things for
I feel that
this
there's a
community.
lot of compassion, there's a lot of empathy, there's a lot of energy
Yes.
among people of all stripes. And when you go into Salinas, you get that, absolutely. My office walks through the literacy program, and I always have to smile, because everyone is serious about this, and they're trying really hard. They are, and so you see that everywhere you look there. It's a really great place. I think there was a news clip on the top 25 best places to work in the United States. Number 20 was Salinas. So people are happy in Salinas. They're not afraid to walk the streets. They want opportunities to make it better. But there's a myth out there that we need to just absolutely crush right now. Last thoughts, Kirstan.
Well, I am a product of Salinas. I grew
Thank
up
you.
there.
I was hoping you would say that.
I grew up there.
And look, you turned out so well.
Went away to college and I came back, and I often tell people,
Yeah.
I can't imagine doing the work that I do in another community, because this is my home. These are the relationships that I have, and there's nothing better than walking down the street. Even in the Alisal, there are many times I'll be at a gas station and I hear someone call my name, and it's kids from our rec centers with their mother.
I was going to say, is it your third grade teacher saying that, Kirstan?
No, it's kids from the centers, and
Yeah.
I think we do have a very rich culture. People
Cohesive community.
Absolutely, they're friendly. I mean, I don't speak Spanish, and I can have a genuine interaction with a mother, with a grandmother, and we both get what we're trying to say. And there's nothing that's more powerful to me that keeps me going, is those relationships in the neighborhoods.
Thank you. Thank you, Megan Hunter. Thank you, Cary Ann Siegfried. Thank you, Kirstan Lundgren, for taking the time out of your insanely busy schedules to come here today and talk about this great city and the work that you do, which celebrates not only Salinas, but the entire area. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is McKibben, and this is the end of our program, YourTown, and our focus is Salinas. Thank you very much.
Thank you.